So every Christmas, you've probably heard this really powerful comparison, that the story of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph is actually a story about refugees. It's a way to connect this ancient story to some very modern and often very heated political debates. In this explainer, we're going to unpack the history behind that very claim.
You've likely seen some version of this argument before. I mean, it's a really sharp, compelling claim. It frames the whole Nativity story as a case of asylum seeking, with King Herod playing the part of a border agent. It's a super effective rhetorical tool for sure. But the question is it historically accurate? Let's take a look.
All right, so if we're going to test this analogy, we can't really start with our world and our laws. No, we have to start with theirs. We've got to understand the political and legal reality of the world the Holy Family actually lived in.
And that world, for all intents and purposes, it was the Roman Empire. And look, this isn't just some random background detail. It is the single most important piece of context for understanding their entire journey.
This right here is the foundational point. Joseph, Mary, and Jesus were not leaving one sovereign nation and trying to get into another. They were moving between two different regions, Judea and Egypt, but both of them were firmly inside the same massive political system, Rome.
This comparison really gets to the heart of it. A Roman subject living in Judea was not considered a foreigner in Egypt. They belonged to the system. So all these modern ideas like unlawful presence or illegal entry, they just didn't apply to someone moving within the empire's own boundaries. So you see, once you understand this, that it was all one single empire, it completely reframes the nature of their flight.
This analogy is just incredibly clarifying, isn't it? They were fleeing a local tyrant, Herod, by moving to a different jurisdiction that was under the same big overarching authority. It was an internal relocation. Yeah, it was driven by a terrible threat, but it wasn't an international border crossing.
Now, this doesn't mean Rome was a world without borders. Oh no, it absolutely had them, and they were often violently enforced. You had legions patrolling the Rhine, the Danube, but, and this is so key, that enforcement was pointed outwards, at non-subjects, at outsiders trying to get in. So the crucial point is that the Holy Family never had to face that kind of external border guard. Now, if they had been fleeing from the neighboring Parthian Empire into Roman Judea, that's a whole different story. Then they would have been treated as foreigners trying to get in, but they were already inside the club, so to speak.
All this historical context actually points us toward a much more precise modern legal category to describe their situation, one that actually helps clarify things instead of confusing them.
Let's look at the modern, internationally accepted definition of a refugee. You see that critical part? You have to cross an international border. You have to leave your country and enter another one.
Okay, now compare that to this category, the internally displaced person, or IDP. An IDP is someone who flees for the exact same reasons, persecution, violence, but they do it without ever leaving their own country. They just relocate within its borders.
And these American examples, wow, they really illustrate the concept perfectly. People who fled the Dust Bowl or the horrific violence of the Jim Crow South were absolutely escaping life-threatening conditions. Their suffering was immense. But legally, because they moved from, say, Oklahoma to California, or from Mississippi to Chicago, they were considered internal migrants, not refugees. So, when you apply this modern legal framework to the historical facts, the conclusion is pretty direct. The Holy Family's flight from Herod perfectly fits the definition of internal displacement. They were fleeing a threat from within their own political system. Now you might be thinking, okay, refugee, IDP, are we just splitting hairs? What's the big deal? Well, this distinction is actually crucial if we want to have a clear conversation about what the story means for us today.
Think about it like this. Our modern debates about immigration are built on this huge, complex legal architecture. We're talking asylum, deportation, sovereignty. None of that really existed for someone moving from one Roman province to another. So trying to impose these modern ideas onto the Nativity story is, well, it's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. We're projecting our world back onto theirs.
And that really gets to the heart of the matter. This isn't about diminishing the suffering of the Holy Family or the moral power of their story at all. It's about insisting on historical accuracy so that we can have honest debates using precise terms, rather than using analogies that are emotionally powerful but, historically, just don't quite fit.
Ultimately, this brings us to a bigger question. The Holy Family's flight is, without a doubt, a powerful story about surviving a violent threat. But by grounding it in its actual historical context,
It forces us to think a little more carefully about how we use the past to talk about the present. What changes when we swap out a flawed metaphor for a more precise history? Now that's a question worth thinking about.